Tonight, I want to thank Jim Quinn for getting information regarding Hebrew poetry from another source. Not that this isn't a great source, but Mike Mazzalongo is a preacher in Oklahoma. He was a dean at the university there. And I'm going to go ahead and use his lesson tonight too, because it's got some very informative and extra things that we can learn. But keep in mind, most of that does coincide with this, but it's in a different format, different way to read it. And I've been driving down to Poway back and forth every day, so my hours are like 5 and 6 hours a day driving. And on top of that, working a full day. So I'm going to see if I can get through this and make it make sense. Let's go to the Father in prayer for this. Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, for your word. Thank you, Father, for the men who bring forth lessons for us. And we just thank you, Father, for each person that is here tonight and that we hear your word and understand it and know why we are studying this particular material. We thank you in Jesus' name. Okay, Hebrew poetry by Mike Mazzalongo. This is his review. The title of the book of Psalms means to praise. It was written over a period of 1,000 years by several writers, with the earliest psalm recorded by Moses, Psalms 90, and the latest in 400 BC, Psalm 150. David wrote approximately 70 of the 150 psalms contained in this book. The reason why we're looking at Psalms is because it does have a lot of the poetry in there, and we will be hitting on some of those here in a few minutes. The Psalms were originally assembled in groups and booklets, but eventually put together into the format we have today. There are 150 Psalms, like I said, divided into 5 sections. These, however, do not include all the Psalms that appear in the Old Testament. Psalms were used in Old Testament times as a Jewish hymnal, and many were sung by the accompaniment of instruments in David's time. It was later used in synagogue worship in this way during the time of Jesus and carried over into early Christian worship as well. Psalms is the most quoted book in the New Testament. It contains many messianic references, and Jesus himself confirmed its divine inspiration. For nearly 30 centuries, it has had a universal and timeless appeal. I also want to mention too that out of 287 times that the Old Testament or Psalms is quoted in the New Testament, it is actually, it has been, it's been quoted 287 times throughout the Bible, but 116 times has been quoted in the New Testament. Old Testament style of writing. We usually concentrate on the content of the Old Testament, but rarely discuss the style in which that content was presented. Most of the Old Testament is written in poetic as opposed to narrative form. This is in line with what we know about the writings of other ancient civilizations of that era. Lyrical poetry is the earliest example of all literature seen in early Egyptian and Babylonian cultures. Thousands of years before Christ, it is the oldest form of written communication. In ancient Greece, the poets sang their songs long before the philosophers and historians arrived on the scene. Among the early Germans and English, the art of poetic composition developed before the art of writing quotations from the Bible, for example, are in poetic form. And we're going to take a look at Lamech's boast, recorded in the book of Genesis, in both Psalm and poem. In Genesis chapter 4, 23 and 24. You turn there, please. Chapter 4, verses 23 and 24. Anybody like to read that?
I'll read it. And Lamech said unto his wives, Adah and Zillah, Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech, for I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and 70-fold.
Okay, so like Linda just read, then what version do you have?
This is the King James.
King James. Okay. Not sure which version he's got here, but it reads, Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, listen to my voice, you wives of Lamech. Give heed to my speech, for I have killed a man for wounding me, and a boy for striking me. If Cain is avengeful sevenfold, then Lamech 77-fold. If you notice in this, where it starts with Adah and Zillah, you skip one down one line, it'll say, you wives of Lamech. He's repeating himself. It's synonymous parallelism. Okay, then listen to my voice. And then below that, give heed to my speech. For I have killed a man for wounding me, and a boy for striking me. If Cain is avenged sevenfold, then Lamech 77-fold. What did he just confess to his wives?
He killed them.
He killed them?
Amen.
Okay. This word gets good, because I used to always wonder about that myself when I was talking about the man and the boy. But in poetic form, since it's in synonymous parallelism, if you look at it, we know by the fact that it's synonymous parallelism. For I have killed a man for wounding me, he repeats himself, and a boy for striking me. So we look at that as this is either a young man or an old boy, older boy. He killed one person. So that's how we can learn from the Hebrew poetic form of writing, is because once you understand it, you're going to know more how it reads, and we can have a better Bible study and knowing as we're going along that everything in there is poetic, Hebrew poetry. So when
I was going to say, because your synonymous thing says it also conveys the exact thoughts, since words and language carry range but imply meaning. So that's what you're saying is about
Right.
young man or boy. Okay. Right.
So when we say poetry versus prose or narrative, we mean a style of writing that is distinguished from prose and narrative. Poetry expresses the emotional and imaginative character of the writer's thoughts. Poetry has the power of imagination and relies on the emotional impact of its verse to convey ideas rather than simply recounting the story and facts. Poetry uses exalted diction, lofty ideas, and noble expressions, thereby making the medium in which it communicates equally important to the content of its message. Having noted this about poetry in general, it's important to understand that one significant difference between ancient Hebrew poetry and much of English poetry is that the poetry of the Hebrews has rhythm of thought rather than the beat of syllables or a rhyming scheme. Not all Hebrew poetry is contained in the Old Testament. 1 Kings 4, 29 through 34, it reads in there, it refers to 3,000 Proverbs and 1,005 Songs of Solomon. It also mentions ancient poetic collections like Book of the Wars of the Lord in Numbers 21 verse 14 and Book of So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nation avenged themselves of their enemies. It is not written in the book of Jashar. And the sun stopped in the middle of the sky, and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. So we don't know what those books are. They've been lost, or they existed at one time. Don't know what happened to them. But we know that in God's Word they existed. Otherwise it would not have been mentioned. But look, those Hebrew poetry were written in these different books. And that proves it right there. So what we have, however, what we do have, however, has been collected and preserved throughout the Old Testament under the guidance and inspiration of the Holy Spirit. Even though men wrote those, it was inspired by the Holy Spirit. So we have 39 books in the Old Testament, written mostly in poetic style, as was with the custom of writing in the days when this material was produced. Okay. Not all Hebrew poetry is written in the same style. Most poetry found in the Old Testament can be broken into two main categories. So here you've got the first one is gnomic. This is, the meaning of that is knowledge. More wisdom. The second one would be lyrical, or lyric, either way you want to look at it, which is done in the form of a song. Those were the styles that were used in the Hebrew poetry. Gnomic, knowledge or wisdom poetry. These were works of thought and reflection, observations on the human condition and society. For example, Job, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes are all examples of wisdom literature in poetry. In the lyric style, the discovery that most of the Old Testament was written in poetic form was made in the 18th century by Bishop Robert Loth. This discovery helped scholars more accurately discern the meaning of the Old Testament writings. We can see the impact of Loth's insight when reading different versions of the Bible. I don't know if anybody has a New American Standard Bible. You do? Okay, Lauren, have you read something? How about, and you've got the King James? Okay. In those, both of you turn to Genesis chapter 9, verse 25 and 26, please. And Linda, you can read yours first.
Shall be unto his brethren. And he said, Blessed be the Lord, God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant.
Okay, Lord.
So he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants, he shall be to his brothers. He also said, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant.
Okay. Yours is written in lines, correct? Short lines.
Yeah.
Yours is written more narrative,
Yeah, it's just in a regular paragraph.
like letter form.
Correct.
Okay. This is what he discovered, Loth had discovered. That's what made the difference. For example, the King James Version of the Bible was published in 1811. Long before Loth's demonstration that most of the Old Testament was in poetic form, so we can see the way it's presented in the King James version of the Bible versus the American Standard, New American Standard. Another example of this change is seen in another verse from Genesis. Genesis 24:60. And they blessed Rebekah and said unto her, this is in letter form, Thou art our sister, be thou the mother of thousands of millions, and let thy seed possess the gate of those which hate them. Now we go to the New American Standard Bible, the version, and it's in poetic form, it's written in short form. The same thing is said there. So, being that it was discovered that way, even though the King James Version was also written the same, it wasn't so noticeable that it was actually in poetic form, or Hebrew poetry.
When you're saying in poetic form, like in what Lori has, it's like, is it what, like, and they blessed Rebekah, and then the second line would be like, and they said it to her, or how?
Yes.
Oh, really? So
It
we're
says
right
here,
now-
it says, they blessed Rebekah and said to her, one line, may you, our sister, second line, become thousands of 10,000s, third line, and may your descendants possess, fourth line, the gate of those who hate them, the fifth line. So it's broken up into sections, into sticks. They call them sticks. Let me might as well write that down. It's spelled that way, but it's pronounced sticks. What it is, a stick can be one line of a poem, or it can be 2 lines or 3 lines, but it's all one sentence, but it's broken up into 1, 2 to 3 sticks. That's how we know that it's in a poetic form. The term lyric comes from the word lyre, which was a stringed instrument used by the Greeks. We all know that. Lyric was a term used to describe poetry that was meant to be sung. Examples of these contained in the Old Testament are these. All right. First one being Psalms, meaning praises. And the second one being Lamentations. Anyone know what that is? The meaning? Which is?
Is it to honor, to hurt, or to give pain of any sort?
Mourn. Mourning. And then we got the third one for blessings and curses. Forewarning of things to come. Forewarning. Forewarning of things to come. Then you've got tribal songs, which is the one that was in what we talk about lament. Yeah, remember, these are all the ones that were sung by the Jews. Then you got the mashals, which is a lesson or parables. some historical event or songs of victory. We sing some of these songs ourselves. A lot of the songs that are in Psalm, Book of Psalms are in our song books. And then you got the dirges, which is the funeral songs. And again, those are from the lyrical style, lyre. Within each Old Testament book, we can find a variety of the aforementioned styles. The one we have here is the rhythm. Most scholars agree that there is a rhythm in Hebrew poetry, but not a type of rhythm found in Western style poetry. As I mentioned earlier, the rhythm in Hebrew poetry does not follow the number of syllables, but rather the pattern of ideas. Hebrew poetry was divided into lines, and each line broken into two or more parts called sticks, like I mentioned earlier. Usually 2 to 3 sticks with several words each. For example, if you look at Psalm 54, chapter 54, verse 1 and 2. And then after that, go to 19:7. So mark both of those. Chapter 54, 1 and 2, and chapter 19, verse 7. If anybody has that, we can read that.
54, 1 and 2. Save me, O God, by thy name, and judge me by thy strength. Hear my prayer, O God, give ear to the words of my mouth. That's Psalm 54.
Okay. Save me, O God, by your name, and vindicate me by your power. That's saying the same thing, correct? The 2 lines has one meaning. Hear my prayer, O God, give ear to the words of my mouth. Saying, repeating just what he said in first part of verse 2, and then repeated the second in a different form, different words. So you've got 2 lines and 4 sticks. The next one, the law of the Lord is perfect. Chapter 9, Psalm 19:7. The law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. So here we have 1 line with 3 sticks. Is that in everyone's Bible? Except Linda's? Can you see that? Yes, no?
4 sticks. Mine's in 4.
Really? Okay. Well, this particular version is in 3 sticks. We have the law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. How does yours read?
The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple.
Okay, so that's how we clean it up. But you can still see the poetry in it. You can still see the rhythm that it has. The stressed word in a stick might have a variable meter indicating where the emphasis should be in pronunciation. Example given, Psalm 19, verse 7. The stressed words would be law, perfect, testimony, sure, and wise. Now, we were talking earlier, this one has the rhythm in it. But in the rhyme, there was no planned rhyme when they wrote these in the Hebrew poetry, they never planned it to have a rhyme scheme in it, but sometimes it just happened. It was coincidence. Now we're going to talk about the devices. Hebrew poetry used several devices to enhance its form and challenge the reader, for example. The first one is assonance. That is, similar sounding words with different meanings. For example, Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 11 and 12. The word for almond is shaked or shaked, while the word for watching is shoked. So you've got shaked, which is almond, shoked, which is watching. An example is this. The word of the Lord came to me saying, "What do you see, Jeremiah?" And I said, "I see a rod of an almond tree." Then the Lord said to me, "You have seen well, for I am watching over my word to perform it." The idea here is that the almond tree is first to bud in the spring, and in the same way God is always first to see how people will react to Him. This similarity is highlighted by the device of assonance, where the two key words are what? Almond and watching. Shaked and shoked. They sound alike. Assonance was a very subtle form of the situation. If you weren't careful when you read that, you could make the mistake of thinking it said the same thing or repeated itself. Okay, so our next device is acrostic. Lines in a poem that begin with the succeeding 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. For example, 22 verses in Psalm 25 form an acrostic where every verse begins with a successive letter in the Hebrew alphabet. Another example is in Lamentations chapter 3. This section contains triple acrostic, and that the verses are arranged in such a way that they repeat the alphabet 3 times. So that's what the acrostic is. So if you see that while you're reading in those books, chapter 25 in Psalms, or chapter 3 in Lamentations, yeah, it's going to be in the Hebrew form, not the English form. But it could be, I mean, you could also do acrostics in English language. It just isn't done there. It's in Hebrew. Then our third device is parallelism. The Old Testament scholar Robert Lopigan in the 1700s discovered the use of this device, especially in the Psalms. Loth realized that unlike Western poetry, where the rhythm and beat were demonstrated in a poem by stressed words or rhyme, for example, in Flanders Field the poppies grow, between the crosses row and row. it was a war poem by John McCrae. Hebrew poetry, on the other hand, had a definite pattern of rhythm, not rhyme, between its ideas, especially in the book of Psalms. By studying and comparing the Psalms, Lowth recognized that the authors purposefully rhymed their ideas, not their words. Further investigation showed that this important poetic device had been abandoned by Hebrew writers after the 2nd century AD. And this is why it had not been noticed until Lowth rediscovered it in the 18th century. Study by Lowth and others managed to catalog 6 major types of this rhyme or thought, which they called parallelism, the most important device in Old Testament lyrical poetry. Okay. Now last week we looked at synonymous parallelism. And that's saying the same thing but in different words in successive lines. And this is the most common type of parallelism. In Psalm 119, verses 1 through 4. If you want to turn there, Psalm 119, verses 1 through 4. It reads, "How blessed are those whose way is blameless, who walk in the law of the Lord. How blessed are those who observe his testimonies, who seek him with all their heart. They also do no unrighteousness, they walk in his ways. You have ordered your precepts that we should keep them diligently." So you look at verse 1, it repeats itself. How blessed are those whose way is blameless, who walk in the law of the Lord. Same in verse 4. You have verse 3. They also do no unrighteousness, they walk in his ways. You're not going to be doing unrighteousness if you're walking in his ways. So if you can see the parallelism that's going on there, synonymous parallelism. When you're reading anywhere in the Old Testament and you run across that, you'll start noticing after a while, when you do read the Bible and study it, you're going to start picking up on these more and more. So it's a good idea to know because it does help us to study and help us to learn more about what God's Word says, just as I made that example earlier about Lamech. I often wondered, a long time ago when I was reading it, whether or not it was that he killed one or killed two. He did kill one. But we know that because it's synonymous parallelism. Okay, the next one is going to be the antithetic parallelism, which we talked about last week. This is the second line contrasts the first line. For example, in Psalm 30, chapter 30, verse 5. Psalm 30, verse 5.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
Isn't that on 119 also?
Yes.
Notice it says in that first verse that it was the letter L.
I'm sorry, say it again.
It says right in the first verse, Al, A-L,
EPH.
E-P-H. I think that's the first Hebrew letter.
Psalm 119, 1 through 4.
Well,
No,
through
regular
eight,
Psalm
but
19.
And 16 is the second.
that's the second letter.
Second.
So if you multiply the 22 letters in the alphabet times 8, you get 176. That's how many verses there are.
Okay.
So they go through it 8 times.
Okay. Thank you.
I can't imagine having to write one. You know,
It takes a lot of thought.
for 8 verses, you want to start with the same letter.
Right.
And the next 8 start with the next letter in the alphabet. And then within that, there are parallelisms. It's just amazing.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that, because this is all new material for me too, and I'm learning it. It's taking time, a lot of hours. Actually, I'm not able to spend as much time reading as I am listening to the information. So I've been doing that. My hours going down, the hours going back. So it's good lessons. The antithetic parallelism, Psalm 30, verse 5. For his anger is but for a moment. His favor is for a lifetime. You see the contrast right there. His anger is but for a moment. His favor is for a lifetime. Starts out negative, comes out positive. Weeping may last for the night. Again, a negative. But a shout of joy comes in the morning. Another positive. That's anything that's contrast. The first line and the second line is going to be parallel, antithetic parallelism. And then you have synthetic parallelism again. The second line completes or amplifies the first. Psalm chapter 2, verses 5 and 6. Then he will speak to them in his anger and terrify them in his fury, saying, but as for me, I have installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain. So he keeps adding to. In the synthetic parallelism, he adds to it, and it builds up. Even synthetic parallelism can be a climatic parallelism at the same time, especially if it's like it's climbing the stairs. It comes to a climax after you read it, you see where it builds up, amplifies. Introverted parallelism. The first and last in a stanza are similar, as are the second and third. This is often referred to as chiasmus. We had that as chiastic last week, or ABBA, A-B-B-A. It's a good way to remember it, A-B-B-A. The first line, A, is going to be the same as line 4. Line 2, B, is going to be the same as line 3, B. B is ABBA, A-B-B-A. So when you see that similarity, you'll know that that is an introverted parallelism. Now we have the climatic parallelism. It's a stair-like, where one line picks up words from the previous line and builds as does the next. For example, Psalm 93:3. The floods have lifted up, O Lord. The floods have lifted up their voice. The floods lifted up their pounding waves. So it goes from the floods are lifted up to the floods have lifted up their voice, the floods lifted up their pounding waves. So it just climaxed. Okay, we're going to look at the emblematic parallelism again. Lines that use like or as to compare ideas, similar to the synonymous parallelism. Psalm 103, 12 and 13. I gotta go through this pretty quick. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. Okay, so here he's using as for the emblematic parallelism. Just as a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. That's anything that has to do with like or as is emblematic. The understanding of parallelism helps us better interpret the Psalms because we can know who the author is referring to when he speaks. For example, in Psalms 8:4, David uses synonymous parallelism in describing God's mercy and caring for human beings. David's reference to the Son of Man in the context of the Psalm refers to a human being because in the first stick, the writer refers to a human being with the term man. This helps us understand that the term Son of Man is the second stick, also refers to a human being and not God, because these two sticks are expressed as synonymous parallelism. So on Psalm chapter 8, verse 4, what is man that you take thought of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him? It is left to the writer of the New Testament book of Hebrews to take the scripture And in the light of New Testament revelation connected to Christ, Hebrews 2, 6 and 8. So he took that same chapter and verse 4 in chapter 8, he took that same one and made it, updated it more or less. But one has testified in Hebrews 2, 6 and 8, but one has testified somewhere saying, what is man that you remember him, or the Son of Man that you are concerned about him? You have made him for a little while lower than the angels. You have crowned him with glory and honor, and have appointed him over the works of your hands. You have put all things in subjection under his feet. So that is also the emblematic. Let's take, this is going to sum it up. We'll be done. The summary is most ancient writings are in poetic form, as in the Old Testament. Old Testament poetry is divided into two main categories. Again, nomic, which is wisdom, and lyric, which is expressive, meant to be sung, helpful style for memorizing. Just like we remember when we were singing as little kids. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, actually learned in Romans. All bit of fleet. Acrostics, verses beginning with successive letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and parallelism, the comparing and balancing of thoughts in successive lines and verses. There are different types of parallelisms. However, synonymous parallelism is the most common form. And I really, truly hope everyone continues to study that. And if you want, you can go to the internet and find our brother and see if, I don't think this,
This series is called Songs for Beginners.
yes, Psalms for Beginners. There is one here, BibleTalk.tv, Hebrew / Hebrew poetry, or hyphen poetry. Anyway, or go to, you just click on the Mike Mazzalongo, Mazzalongo, and should come up under Hebrew poetry. That's it. Thank you.